Hello, everyone. My name is Logan Hart, and I'm very honored to be speaking to all of you here today. And I want to thank you all for showing up here and supporting the great work. What I'm going to be talking to you about today is 3 things that I think can help evolve the natural law perspective. I had a really hard time deciding what to do this presentation on. My original intention was actually to do a very comprehensive delivery of a work that I've actually been working on for a couple of years now. And the more I tried to make that work, the more I realized that that would just be too vast to cover. So I'm just going to focus on what I think is the most important thing that I can say to all of you in context to what everyone else is speaking on as well. So first, a little bit about me. I've been a student of natural law for about 11 years, and I've been teaching it for 3 or 4 of those. I'm the co-creator of The Wizard Factory, which is a spirituality-based podcast founded in the principles of natural law, along with my good friend Brian, who's also speaking here today. So it's a subject that I'm extremely passionate about, and I'm always thinking about and pondering and trying to develop these ideas in a way to make them more useful, because already as they stand, I feel no other body of information has been quite so life-changing as this. So I just have a few things that I think can really help us all grow more together in this community. And this is really just scratching the surface, but this will be the most succinct and potent presentation that I can deliver in this time. So the first point that I want to touch on is that natural law is not limited to just the Hermetic principles. They are certainly a great starting off point, and I see them as extremely foundational to the understanding. But the Hermetic principles are a framework, not a biblical blueprint. And stagnation follows this type of rigid dogmatism that I see very often. And so this is why I'm bringing attention to this, because I think we should be using them as the foundational understanding, but continuing to build on that foundation, discovering new laws, finding new perspectives, and continuing to evolve our understanding of this important topic. So to get into a couple of examples here, first of all, an easy one would be the principle of care introduced by Mark Passio in his natural law presentation. This is his own personal expansion on these ideas. And if you want to learn more about that, I highly recommend going and watching that thing in its entirety. And what that is essentially embodying sort of all of the rest of the Hermetic principles into heart-based intelligence, or what I would say is holistic intelligence. In other words, applying all of the principles, both hemispheres of your brain, your heart, your soul, all of that, and applying it holistically and acting through care. You're not going to see any of that in the Kabbalion, for example. Mark expanded on that himself. Another example would be this idea that Brian Easterday of the Wizard Factory and I have been developing, called awareness creates choice. Very simple idea, but in that those two dynamics are directly tied to each other. So as awareness increases, choice or freedom increases within your own life, the quality of your options. So that would be another example. Or looking at the trivium, which is the building blocks of how reality is actually created. And this concept can be seen everywhere from Greek philosophy to Norse mythology. But the concept is the same because truth is persistent and universal. So moving on to my second point. Morality is not limited to simply cause and effect, which is one of the 7 Hermetic principles. And I'm probably going to spend the most time here. So to understand where I'm coming from here, I first feel the need to sort of differentiate 2 words, morals and ethics. Yes, this is a bit semantic, but words like truth and morality are just too complex, I feel, to be used so broadly. So first, let's talk about ethics. This is something that's more based on something like a code. In the dictionary or something like that, it could show up as abiding by the law, or some sort of fixed code. And these, in the context of natural law, are more easily framed in the negative or apophatic. And these are the things that are universally applicable in all cases. That's what universal means, is applicable in all cases. Or another way of putting it is objective, what many of you know as objective morality. So I'm sort of proposing that would be more on the ethical side of things. Things such as rape, assault, murder, theft, trespass, actual crimes where there is a victim, in other words. Whereas morals are defined as something more personal, and they can be more easily framed in the positive. The things that you don't have to do, but you generally should do. And this is much more subjective and, dare I say, relative to you, what you feel comfortable with, what is the situation. That's a big one too, is sometimes what is right is relative to the situation, to the variables. So morals can be things like, say, to do with others, like feeding the homeless, when to end a relationship or a business partnership, how often to call your mother, or how you speak to other people and how you treat people. These aren't things anyone can really tell you exactly what's the exact right way to do it. It's kind of just up to you to go with what you feel, kind of use your conscience. They can even be something to do with only yourself. For example, choosing to eat a healthy diet, or whether you want to seek Western versus alternative medicine for a problem, or whether to listen to Nickelback or watching too much TV. You can say that those things are bad and they are harmful, but it's still that person's choice to make, and no one can really rightfully stop them from doing that. So simply put, morals are what is right for you. So those unethical actions are all violations of individual property rights. That's very important. And they're based upon the metrics of harm and consent. So if the action taken is a consensual act but causes harm, you could say that it is immoral. In other words, for them, it's harmful, but it is not unethical in that it is a right that can be taken. It's an action that can be taken. If the action is not consensual, then regardless of the harm or even perceived harm, that action is unethical, because that consent is foundational to living in a free world. And so only if it is consensual and not harmful is it then ethical and moral. In other words, in harmony with the higher good of yourself, your health, things like that. And the reason for this distinction is to account for personal sovereignty, which is based in rightful property ownership. You own yourself, full custody, 100% of the shares, and no one else does. And the same is true of everyone else, hence the word universal, applicable in all cases. Your interactions with others obviously include others, and therefore are mutually owned. Your interactions are mutually owned property, and you do not have the full say. So anything that's only to do with you, you have 100% of the say. And when it includes another person, then that responsibility is then shared. So when you engage in a long-term relationship with someone, that relationship then becomes mutual property. And when that consent is withdrawn, regardless of how the other person feels, that's why I say that the consent is kind of the bottom line there, is that is what is engaging in mutually consensual behavior or voluntary behavior. So I like to teach natural law in a simple way, stated as such. If this, then that, sort of the cause and effect aspect of that. If this happens, then that will happen. Or if you do this, then this will be the outcome. But that also applies to the conditions themselves. If these are the conditions, then this will be the outcome. And so the outcome can change based on those conditions, even if the action is the same. So to touch on the Hermetic principles, to begin with what is most likely most familiar is the approach of, as I just said, cause and effect. Direct consequentialism, or karmic law, essentially, is when you have actions, you're putting that forth into the unified reality field that we all share and engage in, and you are subject to the consequences of those actions. Another way I like to put this is you're free to do anything you want. You're just not free from the consequences of those actions. So it's, you can look at it like a right isn't necessarily an ability and vice versa. This really is a very good place to start, again, with that foundational level of understanding the things you don't do. Beyond that, it's within the realm of freedom and personal choice. So you need to get those down first. And if people could do that, we'd already be 80%, 90% closer to a better world. Because in this context, and why this is such an important one to understand, is with the cause and effect here, when you perpetrate one of those actual natural law crimes, you are creating slavery for someone else. So that is the effect of your actions, is creating or enslaving someone, essentially. So again, that really is the most important one to understand, but don't stop there. Keep going. You can look at, even within the 7 principles, there are other ones that relate to morality and ethics. For example, the 4th law of polarity. The law of polarity says that everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. So again, extremes meet. Just those 2 words right there really kind of dial in on what I'm pointing at here. Is that we're talking about gradients, variables, dynamics, things that shift and move, because that's what energy is always doing. And these polarities are just how energy is measured. You have the extreme on each end. You can look at and see what those are, but there is no actual line between them. There's no point in which it goes from end to middle to end. It's really all just one thing. So, for example, even consent and harm have these sort of parameters to them. So you can look at this as, again, where the variables come in, where the different factors, the circumstances come in. You can clearly hear when a person says no. There is no mistaking that. You could mishear it, but it's very clearly in reality. But that doesn't mean that if a person is half asleep or sleepwalking and agrees to something they weren't even aware of, that there's very clearly a gradient of consent here. Or even, and there's a lot of ways you can look at this, say the age of consent, literally, or the maturity spectrum is a gradient. There's no one day that a person wakes up and they're fully autonomous and mentally developed enough to make their own decisions fully. That it happens on a timeline over time. So again, there aren't these hard lines, and trying to draw them, I feel, really disconnects you from that holistic intelligence, that balanced perspective. You also have the law of gender, which is masculine and feminine, positive and negative, essentially how there is a dualistic aspect to everything. I think the most potent way to apply this perspective is seeing that there's that subjective and the objective element to everything. Take something like beauty, for example. They say beauty is in the eye of beholder, and there is truth to that, but all truths are but half truths. There's a reason why some people are just naturally treated better, they get better job opportunities because people agree that there is beauty there. And you could even look at that as based on objective sacred geometry, and that our eyes can perceive the golden ratio in a face and symmetry and see that beauty is apparent. That's not just subject to someone's perception. There's something to that other people can see and subconsciously agree on. So there is both a subjective and objective aspect to beauty and pretty much everything else, including morality and ethics. So there is that subjective or that objective factor that applies to all people, in that everyone has consent and the ability to deny that, and no one can want to have their consent violated, because that is how it's defined by its definition. That is universal. And so applying a certain code to your own life that you don't apply to other people, or extend that same courtesy, that is a logical fallacy, and therefore is in conflict with truth. So there is such thing as objective good. And so even, for example, you can choose to put bad food in your body. That would be an immoral decision because, well, it's your body, it's your property, but you're not respecting yourself as a divine being that's connected to nature. You're putting something disconnected from nature into your body, and the cause and effect of that is your body starts to decay so that it can recycle, and you get to try again because you got it wrong. So good health is objectively good. Nobody doesn't want to be healthy, and if they did, they're also mentally unwell, because only a mentally unwell person would want to be unhealthy or to have harm done to them. So I hope you can see where painting this bigger picture here, in that zoom out and see all the different dynamics, all the different laws, and how they interact with each other, and not focus so much on just the one area. Again, there's so many different ways you could slice this and dive deeper. This is literally just skimming across the surface, and I'm actually dying a little bit inside that I can't dive deeper on these. But another example would be the law of vibration. By simply operating at a higher vibration in your own consciousness, you wouldn't be focusing on always trying to dissect right from wrong, because it comes naturally. It's more even intuitive, for example. So that's another way you can see that looking at it more holistically is actually a lot more effective in the outcome and the overall moral conduct of a person. So finally, that brings me to my third point that I want to touch on here, and that is comparing the monotheistic to the animist mindset. I'm aware that many of you are not familiar with the word animism, but it comes from anima, which is essentially the belief in a universal life force that gives anima, or this is where we get the word animate from, is when something is animated, it's imbued with the divine life force of the energy of the universe. And looking at it from this perspective, in terms of, and in relation to paganism, I see them as different, but still very almost interchangeable as far as words go, because paganism is animism, I guess you could say. So to help break this down, let's look at each of these words a little bit more closely. Monotheism, you have mono meaning one, and theist, which is essentially theology being the study of God. This belief system brings with it what I call the monolithic mind virus. Again, mono means one. These are monolithic belief systems. Monolithic meaning centralized and static, stagnant. Think about monoculture, where a single crop is completely obliterating a ecosystem and scorching the earth just to grow this one vegetable. It's stagnant and toxic, and it destroys nature, literally. Monolithic belief systems, such as monotheism, do the same thing on the mental plane. They create a disconnect between the subject and the actual spiritual experience, the human experience. So to me, animism and paganism is essentially observing nature and its laws directly, creating your own scientific experiments and actually interacting with them. It means having a direct relationship with nature, with the gods, with the stars, the planets, the signs. These are all just archetypal concepts that are depicting very real cosmic energies that are all around. And by all around, I mean out there, but also in here, because as law of correspondence states, as within, so without, and vice versa. This is why something like astrology is such a profound study of human and cosmic psychology, because they mirror each other. And the more you learn about the one, the more you learn about the other. This is all a process of self-discovery. Discovering yourself through the universe, discovering the universe through yourself. So treating books and YouTube channels and presentations like Bibles reminds me of Christian denominationalism. It's essentially intellectual masturbation, and it has no basis in reality. So you need to cultivate those relationships with those universal cosmic energies, come to know them, and stop treating books and YouTube channels and any other source of information like a Bible that's just something to be memorized and regurgitated and argued about on the internet. It's about applying it to your own life and using it to empower yourself. And this constant searching of external sources of truth just only goes to show the lack of actual application. Because once you truly start to understand natural law for yourself, you don't need some kind of external rule book or something to live by. There is no such thing as an all-encompassing code that is going to give you the perfect outcome for every single situation. And if it did, why would you want that? That completely defeats the purpose of living your own life and having that experience to discover it for yourself. I just see it as such a distraction that is taking so much away from how this message is being viewed by outside people that may be curious about these things, and then they see the arguing and the very divided cliques of different beliefs and things like that. So to summarize, I can't stress the importance of conducting your own experiments, finding that truth for yourself. Try to put less emphasis on sources outside yourself and just be okay having an experience. And then really take that understanding and that knowledge and take action on it and apply it to your life and allow it to elevate you to be more empowered to create a better and more free world. So I hope that this has helped broaden some perspectives for some of you. I hope that you found some value in this. If you would like to see more of my work, I would love for you to check out the Wizard Factory YouTube channel. We have a podcast and thewizardfactory.com to find out more about our platform, where we offer various spirituality-based services such as personal consultations, rune readings, astrology readings. You can also find my other channel, Heartfire Visions, on YouTube, where you can listen to the full-length musical soundtrack which I produced for Mark Passio's upcoming Natural Law documentary. So again, I hope you enjoyed this presentation. It was a pleasure and an honor to speak here, and mad respect and shout out to all the other speakers here. I love you guys. And until next time, I hope you all stay empowered, inspired, and encouraged.